Who is this sitting here with his hand touching his head? That is the Apostle Paul. And what is he holding in his hand right here? A feather. But what is that feather for? To write. And what was he writing? He was writing a letter to his friends, and that letter became the Bible. Now, I'm going to show you who he was writing a letter to, and it's going to be a little bit scary. Are you ready? Dun -dun. This is a picture from high up above the earth in a plane. And if you look down, you can see here, this is Corinth, and that is where Paul is writing his letter to. Let's zoom in. Here you can see the city of Corinth, and all these white things are all buildings, and this is all water. Now, did you know that when Paul first came to this city, he didn't know anyone, and there were no Christians in Corinth? So, do you know what he did? He took with him some friends that could help tell the people about Jesus. Do you know who they were? Priscilla and Aquila. This is Priscilla and this is Aquila. That's probably what they looked like, and they were helpers to the Apostle Paul, helping him to tell everyone about Jesus. So these two and this guy all worked together to tell the Corinthians about Jesus. Now, Priscilla and Aquila, do you know what their job was? It was the same job as Paul's job. Do you know what Paul's job was? To tell people about Jesus, that's right. But he also had a job that he did that made him money. And that job was he made what? He made tents. That was his job. And that was also Priscilla and Aquila's job. They all made tents. So they would make tents together in the daytime, and then at night they would go tell the people of Corinth about Jesus. Now here's some pillars that are from Corinth. This is what the buildings were like. These buildings are all broken down now because Corinth is an old city, and all those buildings broke down. Maybe there was a war and those buildings fell down and stuff, but Paul was walking around these pillars, and Priscilla and Aquila were walking around and selling their tents and telling people about Jesus. Now here's another map, and Corinth is right around right here, and that's where Corinth is. If you look at this picture, this is a big bowl that they used to use in Corinth. And they would, you know how we have big bowls? What do we keep in our big bowls? Rice, beans, lots of different kinds of food, maybe water or juice to pour into our cups. Well, yeah, we got bottles, but they didn't have bottles then. They had big things like this, urns. And this is what the Corinthians used to store things in their kitchen. Now, here is something called a Corinthian column. And at the top of a big pillar, they would make this thing that looks like this. Isn't that so pretty? That was what the Corinthians did, so they called it a Corinthian column. Yeah, the Corinthians made very beautiful things, but there was a problem in their city. They weren't good people. They didn't obey God, and they would be like showing their privates to everyone, and they would be like stealing, and they would be just like arguing and fighting with each other. And so when Paul came to that city with Priscilla and Aquila, they had to work very hard to tell those people about God. But pretty soon there was a church in Corinth right about right there, and they would meet together and worship God. But do you know what happens? the religious people in Corinth didn't like Paul, and they started to give Paul a very hard time. They did not like what Paul was telling them about God. So you know what Paul did? He said, you know what? I'm not going to tell all the religious people about God. I'm just going to go and tell the bad people. So he went to the bad people with Priscilla and Aquila, and do you know what those bad people did? They decided to worship God and stop being bad. But Paul wasn't sure if he should stay in that city or not. Should he stay here or should he go to another city and tell people about God? He wasn't sure what to do. So one night, he went to sleep in his bed. And do you know who came to him in his dreams? Jesus came to him in his dreams. And do you know what Jesus said to him in his dreams? Jesus said, "Don't be afraid, Paul. Even if there's bad people or if people don't like you, don't be afraid, but keep on speaking and do not be quiet. Keep telling people about me, for I am with you, and no one will hurt you because I have many people in this city." So Paul said, "Yes, Lord, I will obey." And he stayed in Corinth for a whole year and a half telling everyone about God. A long time. And later on, after he left Corinth, and he went up, I'll show you where he went. He went like up here, and he was like traveling around here, and that was when he was missing his friends in Corinth, and he heard they were having some problems. So he was up here, way up here in these countries, and you know what he did? He got out his pen, and he wrote down on some paper a letter to the Corinthians. And the letter to the Corinthians is what made the book Corinthians in the Bible. So when we read Corinthians, we're reading the letter that Paul wrote to his friends in Corinth.